Greetings, everybody. Welcome to part two of my top Black sitcom episodes that changed the game. This is your boy Reg in the building. Thank y'all so much for the love I got for part one and whatnot too. You know what I'm saying? If you guys have not seen part one, I pretty much talked about 70s and 80s. This episode is specifically going to be the 90s because a lot of the 90s episodes I do have a lot to talk about and whatnot too, and it is a good amount of 90s. So I'm trying to see if I can just do this before I head to work. So the first episode I'm going to talk about is the classic Amen episodes, The Wedding. This was on the fourth season between February 3rd, 1990. Amen, a show that we talked about in the past. You know what I'm saying? Another underrated show. Very dope writing. Very underrated ensemble. You had Sherman Hemsley, Clifton Davis, Anna Maria Horsford. You know what I'm saying? Just to name a few. And this was the episode where Velma and Ruben finally got married. Because if you guys watched this season, all my diehard Amen fans, you know that it was a struggle with them trying to get married. It's like for one, it was pretty much like they got married, they tried to get married, and Ruben done fainted and everything. Then Velma joined the army, and then she had a brief love interest with Richard Roundtree and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And so with this episode, you finally had them trying to get married, them getting their shit together and everything like that too. And then the Reverend this time faints. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ. You know what I'm saying? And it got to the point where it's just like Ruben pretty much, since he's a Reverend, he can actually marry himself and them. I'm just like, well, why the hell you didn't just think of this damn shit episodes ago? You know what I'm saying? And it got to the point where it was like fucking they got married and shit like that too. And of course they ended up with that dance troupe, that dope ass dance scene and everything. Oh my God, they did their thing. And this was an accomplishment of character because this was the season where Anna Maria Horsford pretty much killed her scenes as Velma. Because, you know, in the first couple of seasons, her character was pretty much more on the goofier side, insecure, immature. But then it's like, and I really, really wanted to highlight the episode Velma Says I Do and stuff like that. I'm going to make a slight edit and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying? And I really didn't want to highlight that episode because the way she stood up for herself. But I decided to actually pick this episode just due to the fact how both of them finally admitted their feelings to one another and whatnot and shit, and how both of them pretty much just got their shit together, got married, and it was again another celebration. It was again another celebration of love, black love, and everything like that too. You know what I'm saying? Definitely a favorite episode when it comes to Amen. An episode a show I wish got more attention. But when I say this list is full of surprises, in the past, I might have an episode or two where I look and I say, this episode's better than I thought it would be, or this episode aged better. So the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode Ethnic Trip from season 1, January 14th, 1991. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Season 1, the same season with the pilot episode, the episode where Will and Carlton were racially profiled, episode where Ice Trade came, the episode where Carlton embraced Compton. I could have easily picked any of them, but why this one? So, well, first of all, let me tell you what this episode's about. This episode pretty much is about Will not doing well in history, and he pretty much tells Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil how they don't always teach the right black history and everything like that too, especially with the school predominantly being white. And so Viv takes Will to the PTSA meeting or whatever, and she volunteers herself to be a substitute history teacher. So Will and Carlton think it's going to be an easy ride. Will thinking, since it was his idea, he was pretty much going to be the star of the class. Carlton thinks he's going to have an easy ride because Aunt Viv is his mom and whatnot, you know what I'm saying? And so Aunt Viv actually puts them to work. She actually gives them literature, like black literature to read, makes them write the reports and whatnot. Will and Carlton knew that it was going to be harder than they thought. And Aunt Viv at the end pretty much gives both of them a reality check, especially Will, that, you know, just because you wear the black medallion to recognize the black history, there's more to learn about black history, because you got to remember, people are always going to whitewash history one way or another, but you got to have the right mind state and the right knowledge to expand your ritual truth and learn more about that shit and understand how our leaders got to where they are due to all the struggles, due to all the sacrifice that they made. This might be a y'all might look at me saying, y'all think you're reading too much about this. Well, if you really look at what's going on today, especially with their president pretty much trying to ban a lot of books by a lot of black authors, and then the shit that's going on in Florida as well too. This episode is kind of ahead of its time, because in a lot of times in the early 90s, a lot of shows were starting to recognize Malcolm X's vision, especially his book, like the autobiography of Malcolm X and stuff like that too, you know what I'm saying? So I know there was another show called True Colors. I think it was called True Colors, something like that. It was a show with Nancy Walker. And they try to talk about that book, but I didn't really like the message they did in that fucking episode. I'm gonna be real with you. But yeah, man. But yeah, so it pretty much ends with like Will rereading with the autobiography of Malcolm X and everything. And I definitely feel like that episode was pretty ahead of its time. Now, I know for a fact I didn't put that episode in my top Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode. Moving on, we got the Rock episode, Can't Help Loving That Man. This episode aired October 20th, 1991 on its first season. Again, another episode I highlighted on my sitcom Revisited, but I am going to say this is a very groundbreaking, probably one of the best known episodes of the show. And this episode pretty much has like Andrew, which was Rock and Joey's dad, not really happy that his brother is coming into town and everything with some news. And we later found out that his brother is actually gay. And at the same time, he's going to marry a white man. Now, this was before interracial gay marriage became legal and whatnot. So this episode, again, was a pretty bold episode for the time. But you got to remember, Rock was a very bold sitcom and whatnot, too. You know what I'm saying? Like, you take the Norman Lear attitude, mix in with the style of the Honeymooners, and I feel like that's pretty much what you got with Rock. And I definitely feel like this episode definitely highlighted sibling rivalry, and it definitely mirrors like Rock and Joey's somewhat rivalry and stuff like that too, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of interesting how that episode plays about, but I definitely did a more thorough writing on that on the sitcom Revisit, so y'all definitely check that out. All right, next we got the Different World episode, Mammy Dearest. This was on the 5th season, airing on December 5th, 1991. Again, another episode I highlighted on Sitcom Revisited, you know what I'm saying? But I am going to spend a good amount of time with this one. So Whitley pretty much is trying to do this little black art thing, and she wants to highlight the mammy stereotype. Now, you guys should know about the mammy stereotype and everything like that too. You know what I'm saying? Pretty much that caricature a black woman caricature and whatnot too. And this bothers Kim a lot. Kim being a dark skinned woman and whatnot too, it triggers her. So she even goes off on Dwayne and Ron when they were doing your mama jokes at one another. You know what I'm saying? And so pretty much, the second half of the show, just when you actually have the exhibit and everything like that too, you know what I'm saying? And it pretty much is something that is very one of those different world scenes that you're just in awe just looking at it. You know what I'm saying? And pretty much it shows Kim in a very, very, very good light, dark skinned woman in a very great light and everything like that too. Reciting poetry from a lot of black women and everything, which I definitely feel, again, something that you never seen on the show like that. Also, you have the origins. They also explain the origins of the dozens too, which we talked about the dozens before when I talked about that Jefferson's episode, Jenny's Low. You know what I'm saying? Now, this episode pretty much is still a pretty controversial episode when it comes to A Different World. And when I was watching the unsung episode, a lot of the cast members, dark skin and light skin, they definitely felt like this episode was pretty something and stuff like that too. It was gonna trigger a lot of discussion, but I feel like they definitely pulled it off, and it shows how black women were portrayed and perceived at the time when it was not really broadcasted a lot on network television. So that's my next pick. So moving on, we're going to get into the Martin episode, Hollywood Swingin', Part 1 and Part 2. This episode airs November 7th and November 14th of 1993. Martin. What can I say about that show? I mean, that show pretty much arguably one of the top funniest sitcoms of all time, of the decade. You know what I'm saying? The cast, the writing, and shit like that too. When the show was at its best, it was a show like no other. And the second season is possibly my favorite season of the show. And this season definitely had a classic episode, Hollywood Swinging, aka pretty much with this episode. Excuse me. This episode pretty much talks about black celebrities and whatnot too. Barney Hill coming to town, and he's like a successful TV host. He used to be a DJ on WZUP, which was Up, you know what I'm saying, which was like Martin's radio station that he was working on. And Martin is like questioning himself because all of his friends are getting promotions, they're getting advances in their career, and he feels pretty much stuck and everything like that too, you know what I'm saying? And so you had that classic radio interview with Martin and Barnell Hill and everything like that too, you know what I'm saying? Pretty much how, embracing that celebrity, embracing that celebrity culture and everything like that too. Pretty funny as hell. You can tell a lot of those dialogue between Martin and Tommy, which was ad-libbed and everything like that too, you know what I'm saying? So I definitely feel like that episode is literally like one of the best episodes of the show. But part 2, again, well, in difference between part 1 of the big movie being set to part 2, I definitely feel like part 1 and part 2 definitely was at the same level comedically and storytelling wise and everything, because now we're actually in Hollywood and you see like all these like celebrity impersonators and stuff like that. So you know what I'm saying? You see Madonna, Michael Jackson and everything. Hell, you have my man Fred Berry, Rerun from What's Happening, guest starring on that episode as well too. You know what I'm saying? And it pretty much, the thing of what I loved about that episode was when you had that talk show scene and Jodeci performing and Martin pretty much fucking up the performance, which was not scripted. I'm just gonna say that. And the looks Casey and JoJo all gave him, they were really ready to pounce on him and whatnot too. But look up the interview on that. That's a crazy story itself. And pretty much, it talks about how Varnell Hill, even though he's a successful talk show host and celebrity, it shows that he had to kiss the ring a few times just to get to where he's going and everything like that too. You know what I'm saying? I definitely feel like this episode is definitely a classic episode. Love it. Moving on to the next episode, No Justice, No Peace, also from season 2, airing on January 9th, 1994. This is a classic man versus the system episode, you know what I'm saying? So Martin and his friends pretty much were driving around trying to look for a party, and a cop stops them thinking that Martin drove past a red light or a stop sign or whatever, and pretty much, you know what I'm saying, he wants to fight the ticket and everything. So he ends up going to court, and in true Martin fashion, he makes pretty much an ass out of himself and everything like that too, you know what I'm saying? Though this is an episode that I definitely can see how Martin was definitely influenced by, Martin the show was influenced by In Living Color in a way and stuff like that too, you know what I'm saying? Because if this was any other black sitcom or any other sitcom at that time, it would have taken like a more serious tone and everything like that, you know what I'm saying? But Martin, you know, he still is dropping facts and everything, even though Cole ends up fucking it up as usual. You know, this is the episode where you had the classic got them draws. This is the episode where you had the classic Martin outburst in the courtroom, shows a lot of his living color influence and whatnot. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he did try out to become part of that show, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong and whatnot, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, man. But again, it's one of the more broader episodes of the show, a true classic. Moving on, we got another episode I highlighted in my sitcom revisited and whatnot too, you know what I'm saying? Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Papa's Got a Brand New Excuse. You know what I'm saying? This episode airing on May 9th, 1994. I want to say it's like the third to last episode of the fourth season. You know what I'm saying? We all know the story with this one. I feel like next to Good Times to Big Move, it might be one of the more impactful episodes of like black sitcoms and stuff like that too, because you know Will's father returns to his life after walking out on him and his mom, and you know his father being played by Ben Vereen and everything like that too, you know what I'm saying? And pretty much, you know, a lot of people in this family are having feelings of concern for Will and skepticism on Lou's part, like why is he back in town? Does he really want to be serious about Will this time around and shit, you know what I'm saying? And so it ends up going good, but then Will and Uncle Phil have that big falling out when Uncle Phil just cannot let go of his feelings against Lou and whatnot, you know what I'm saying? And so Will tells Uncle Phil, you are not my father, which crushes Uncle Phil. You know what I'm saying? Great acting by James Avery with that facial expression and everything, you know what I'm saying? And one thing I loved about this episode was the fact that you had different sides of Phil and Vivian. Even though with the Vivian part, I really wish it was kind of highlighted a bit more, since Vivian is Vi's sister, but I don't know, because at that time, you know, they had that Vivian switch, and Daphne Maxwell Reid came on the show as Aunt Viv too, you know what I'm saying, which y'all watch my thoughts on the top episodes of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, see my thoughts about her, you know what I'm saying, and of course on the sitcom retrospective as well too. But yeah, you had that scene where she tells Phil that it's all Will's decision, you know what I'm saying, you know, you're not only hurting Will, but you're hurting yourself, pretty much, you know what I'm saying. So yeah, so then you have that classic scene where Lou and Phil has that confrontation, then he tells Will that he's not able to take him with him for the summer and whatnot, and Will pretty much goes through a lot of stages. You know, at first he's joking around saying, He has a lot of time for something for himself, which then turns into anger about the fact that he wastes his money on a statue, and how it turns into just cockiness and how he taught himself how to do a lot of things and everything like that. And then it turns into anger again as he screams and tells, he screams and yells to hell with him and everything like that. Then it goes to motivation. And he tells himself he's going to have a beautiful honey, a beautiful family. He's going to be a better father than Lou ever been to him. And then finally it just turns into sadness, wondering how come he does not want him. I mean, that is just fine acting. And even the story about how James Avery and Will Smith was doing this scene, Will messed up and he got angry, and James Avery had to like coach him, saying, hey, you got this. And so when they did that scene alone, pretty much when Uncle Phil hugs Will, James Avery, he whispered to Will, now that's acting and everything like that too. And, you know, you can definitely hear people crying in the background and shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, the greatest episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, in my personal opinion, you know what I'm saying? I mean, this is a classic episode. Moving on, we got the Living Single episode, Hair Raising Experience, coming from the second season, a classic episode of the Living Single and shit like that. This episode has Kyle, which is pretty much one of the show's more interesting characters, you know, in the line for promotion. But at the same time too, I think like his rival, I think his name was like Larry or whatever, who appeared on the episode in the first season where they had that poker game and he calls the girls bitches and shit like that too, and he was dating Regine. We all know that episode and everything, and that was so close to making my list too, but I feel like this episode definitely spoke more volumes. And the reason why, and one of the things he has to do to get a promotion, according to him, was to shave his hair or to cut his hair, because it shows how a lot of these companies want people to act a certain way, get rid of their heritage and everything like that too, just to advance in the company. But at the same time, some of these companies are going to treat you like dirt and everything. And black hair has always been a symbolism when it comes to our culture and everything like that too, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like with this episode, that episode from Living Single, the speech that Kyle gives and everything like that too, he's like, he's not going to go down, he's going to stand up for what he believes in, and going to say that his hair represents him. And I definitely feel like that episode alone is a very important episode on black identity and everything, and I definitely feel it is a classic episode of the show, you know what I'm saying? The episode from the first season, I Do, I Don't. This episode aired February 23rd, 1997. Now, the Steve Harvey show has definitely been one of those shows that I personally feel slightly underrated in its own right. You know what I'm saying? I feel like it had a few good seasons here and there. Made me laugh a few great times and shit. Personally, I feel like the first season might be my favorite season of the show, because here's the thing, the first two seasons are my favorite because of how it talks about like the plot, the original plot. The third and fourth season definitely has some of the show's more broader and funniest episodes of the show. The fifth and sixth season, while not really my favorite, still managed to soldier through and ended at the right exact time, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? But the first season alone had a lot of home runs, and I Do, I Don't was one of those episodes where it has two unrelated plots that managed to somehow work. Now, the plot that made me really want to pick this episode was the plot where it has the kids wanted to see if Steve is really going to let Puffy sample one of his joints and everything like that too. Puffy, Diddler, whatever. Anyway, but and you know, at the same time too, you know, Snoop Dogg was also going to come to the school as well too, you know what I'm saying? And this was released literally at the time of the whole East Coast, West Coast beef months after Tupac got gunned down in Vegas and everything like that too, and everything. So that was definitely on a lot of people's minds at that time when you had Puff being from the East and Snoop being from the West, which there's been a lot of stories about just that time alone and everything like that too. So yeah, so pretty much with this episode alone, it pretty much shows the relationship about that Steve giving Puff and Snoop the speech about how a lot of kids look up to y'all music. You can't have a lot of y'all dying. You can't have like a lot of y'all dying and shit like that too. You know what I'm saying? And you know, it's ironic because this episode aired February 23rd, 97, a few days before Biggie got gunned down. Crazy as hell, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, so yeah, this episode is very, very, very interesting. And at the end of the day, they ain't even gonna sample Steve's music at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, this episode definitely was very interesting. And the other subplot of the show was like Regina's 40th anniversary of her parents and everything like that too, and Steve trying to help out, you know what I'm saying, and the parents getting mad. You know, the traditional anniversary party, the parents are getting mad at one another, and you kind of see the stepping stones of Steve and Regina's relationship with that episode alone too. And you know, while Steve and Regina may not have been a black couple that might not have been on like a iconic status of like Dwayne and Whitley and Martin and Gina, they still definitely had a solid chemistry comedically and like relation rise and stuff like that too. So that's that episode right there. And the final episode is the Moesha episode, Hello, What's This? This was part of the 4th season episode that aired October 20th, 1998. You know what I'm saying? The 4th season probably is one of the show's best seasons. Probably the show's last great season. You know what I'm saying? Moesha is a show I've been toying with reviewing. I like the show, but I have some issues with it. And this was definitely one of the better episodes of the show. So around the time of this show, you know what I'm saying? Around the time of the show, Frank pretty much and Moesha had the issues and whatnot too. Moesha pretty much ran away because Frank was just too controlling. Moesha was just wilding out that whole season 3. If you ask me, she was definitely wilding out that season. And when she comes back home, everything pretty much is going good and everything like that too. But then Dee ends up finding a joint on the kitchen, and Frank automatically assumes that it's Moesha's. And he confronts Moesha, and Moesha was like, no, that's not mine. I've never done that before. You know what I'm saying? And pretty much, you know, again, this just goes back to all those old habits with Frank just not trusting Moesha and everything. But Moesha was pretty much mature about this because she knows she didn't do it. She knows it wasn't hers. However, it's that final scene alone when it ended up being Miles' joint. And he did this as a way of getting attention because he feels like his parents was always focused on Moesha when it comes to her issues. And he feels like if he acts out, he would definitely get attention from his parents and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And so definitely a very, very, very classic episode and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? This episode is definitely another reason why Frank Mitchell is pretty much one of the most controversial fathers in sitcom history, because he does have his moment where he's a good father, but I feel like with a certain, I'm not even gonna say that development because you guys should know and everything like that, a certain development that happened towards the latter seasons, he kind of tainted him. And episodes like this alone pretty much kind of maybe shed an interesting light, kind of shed an interesting light when it comes to his role as a father. But 2 down, 1 more to go. That's pretty much all. That's pretty much all the episodes I have for the '90s list, and the next episode is definitely going to be 2000s up until present and stuff like that too. So definitely stay tuned on that, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.